Greetings and welcome to this week's special lecture that is going to be delivered, as you all know, by Mike King. And many people have picked up a copy of our special report, Black Sun Rising, which accompanies our new film on the esoteric roots of fascism, past and most importantly, present, because certain things that we don't appreciate about the past or have been taught to look at through a warped lens has resulted in blind spots that are resulting again in patterns repeating unnecessarily. Things we should have learned from, we are not learning from in sufficient numbers and quality. And Mike presented, I found, just the most perfect way. He delivered, I asked him to condense some of his research on the topic of the Rothschilds as a case study in the Hofjuden principle, one of the mechanisms for the continuity and maintenance of empire. Oh, you know somebody there? One of the core mechanisms for the maintenance and the continuity transgenerationally of the system of this unnatural system of empire has been, at least especially in the last 1,000 years, in a very particular expression of it, at least since the Crusades, has been this Hofjuden principle, of which the Rothschilds are a leading, very visible expression of it. And Mike's work, I found Mike about a year ago, and as a researcher, as a communicator of very complex ideas, I was very impressed by Mike, and so I asked him to condense his work into a chapter which ends that special report. So if people have not had a chance to pick up that report, I highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon, or just communicate to us, and I'll tell you how to get a copy. Mike is going to take some of those thoughts and expand upon them even more today. And like usual, after his main presentation is done, we're going to open up for some Q&A. And I see that Mike's the video has frozen. I hope that doesn't apply to the audio as well. Mike, can you still hear me?
Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you perfectly.
Yeah, it's because I was pulling up another screenshot, but I didn't know that was going to freeze my video.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah. So for the Q&A, let me just say this. I have a lot of things. I have a lot of things that I've written on this, but because I had things in bullet point format to go over on my computer, I had to redo a lot of that. So for the Q&A, I think that'll be a good time to get into things that I didn't have time to get back down on the screen that's in front of me to get on track. But what I might have to do is go through, because what I will do is I will use a word search on tweets where I can have like citations and screenshots and make sure I get the names and dates right and things like that in front of me. So yeah, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the presentation that's in front of me, and then I definitely have more I can get into after that, because with the write-up I gave you on the Black Sun book, I focused on the 5 Rothschild brothers, the 5 arrows, and their progeny, like how they got promoted through an older dynastic system. So the core argument that I made there is that the power structure that we live in and that Rothschilds became a major banking player in, this thing is actually ancient, but due to various conditions changing through history, this power structure has to update how it operates and how it works. So a big example is I'd say a major bottleneck for how far back this goes is the Greco-Roman period. Now you can argue it goes back earlier, it goes back to the Middle East, and you can even say that in the way that we do things and the way that power operates, there's actually some continuity and integration of institutions and even bloodlines from the Muslim world as well, right? But I'd say I for simplicity call it a continuity of the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire back at its peak, like when it's known as being the Roman Empire at the Pax Romana era, it was pretty much this giant military power where they specialized in engineering, aqueducts, infrastructure. So they had infrastructure that could integrate agriculture in a way that could grow a lot of large populations. But whenever they conquered a place and gave them infrastructure, they were able to successfully like psychologically condition those populations and integrate their aristocrats into Roman aristocratic culture, but also integrate their publics into soldiers and mass conscript them. But the core contingent, I'd argue the core contingent, this power structure never went away, but this method of conquest and holding on to power it's not really all that sustainable long term. And you can go back to Babylonian history, like with Naram Sin, Sargon of Akkad, later on Sargon II in Assyria. You can see all these people saying like, yeah, we want to be the kings of the world. We want to rule the whole world. We're the kings of the four earth. And of course, like they didn't literally have a global spanning empire, but you go over to Alexander the Great and Emperor Augustus, you have a bunch of these people saying, yeah, we want to create a global empire. We want to create a global power structure. So it's kind of naive to think that these people would want to give up that kind of project, and they didn't. Whenever conditions change, like such and such condition came up to where the whole Roman militaristic expansionist model wouldn't work. If you read J. Edward Gibbon, who wrote the Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire, he actually argues that Christianity is one of the causes for the fall of the Roman Empire as this military power, because it's like, to be able to maintain their martial culture, they had to instill martial virtues. And this is why Stoicism, when they wanted to psyop populations and instill martial virtues into them, Stoicism would actually be a major component of that. But there's a lot of ways in which Stoicism and some of their values can line up with Christianity, but there's also a lot of other ways that they can be a little bit different. And he pretty much argues that Christianity's more pacifistic type orientation actually made that model unsustainable, even as it was growing. And I think that there's some truth to it. So what I think they did is I don't think this just happened with Emperor Constantine. It's like you'll hear a lot of these conspiracy narratives come out where it's like, oh, Christianity was like this one thing. It was like this pure thing. It was this pure non-hierarchical thing. Then Emperor Constantine came around, had the Council of Nicaea, and integrated like the Babylonian pagan trinity into it, and he morphed Christianity into like this method of conquest. I don't quite go all the way there. I have some videos. Okay. This is going to get a little off topic. I do have a video that says it's going to be the title if you go on my YouTube channel, identifying Ninus and Semiramis, because the idea that there's this whole Babylonian trinity that the Catholic Church spun and integrated and made like their trinity at the Council of Nicaea continuity of, a lot of that comes from Alexander Hislop's research, and he makes a lot of errors where he identifies Ninus as Nimrod. And there's this queen from Assyria named Sema-Arat who was imposed back at that time period. And then he pretty much says that she's the basis of ISIS, even though she didn't come around until like the 750s. So it's like there's a lot of timeline mistakes. Ninus is also a composite figure. It's like you can see a little bit of Ninus in Sargon of Akkad. You can see him in some of the founders of like various stages of Assyrian imperialism. But like he comes from this Greek Ctesias, who was part of the Persian court writing, and he like says, oh look, this Ninus guy and Semiramis, they conquered territory over in Afghanistan, over in the Bactrian complex, which we know that didn't happen with any Assyrian figures. And he's claiming this Assyrian figure goes back 2,100 years ago. So Hislop will look at that, 2,100 BC. So Hislop will look at that and say, look, that lines up with Nimrod's time period. But like, there's so many genealogical issues there. It's like, he says that there are 30 kings after Ninus to the fall of Nineveh, but he dates the fall of Nineveh completely wrong. It's like Nineveh fell around 600 BC. But he has Nineveh falling in the mid 10th century BC in like the 900s, so that's too long. Then he also has kings' generations elongated like twice as long as they were. So if you look at the timeline of who he claims Ninus was being 30 kings back, it's Tukulti Ninurtu. It's Tukulti Ninurtu. He was a major player who made Assyria a regional power. But what he's doing is he's like mixing in all these stories of Persian conquests and other regions, because he's like, whenever Persia conquers a place, they want to say, because he's trying to impress them. He wants to be able to say, oh well, you're inheriting what the people you're conquering and these civilizations that you're stewarding are doing. So you're kind of like this mythological King Ninus. But I'm just pointing that out to show you that like when you get into this conspiracy genre and you get into people making these overarching historical narratives about like where all these mystery religions came from and trying to reduce it to a single power structure and a single continuous empire, there's a lot of slop going on there. So that I got a little bit off topic because I was getting into the transition of the military hard Roman Empire to when it became like this more soft kind of religious power structure, which would be more of like the era of the Catholic Church. But there's a lot of reductionism going on there. So I don't, like, back to what I was saying. I don't think it was just like everything got psyoped and retconned at the Council of Nicaea and under Emperor Constantine. But I do think there was a transition there, because you'd have the title of Roman Emperor Pontifex Maximus going from the Roman Emperor himself over to the papacy and the Pope. And Constantine did do away with the Praetorian Guard, which would be about the equivalent of the Roman CIA and the Roman spy arm. And eventually what you had monastic institutions sort of take that place, and you had them do a lot of good things. It's like, so one between when you have the so-called Dark Age after like 476, when and I'd say you had a bigger population decline, a bigger fall off of like the whole Roman monoculture. In the 500s, after Justinian reconquered Italy, you had a large decline in literacy, you had a large decline in populations, you had a large decline in agriculture. And some of the people who would become stewards of knowledge and become the top historians of the time, and also I'd argue they would be the equivalent of intelligence. Irish monks actually played a big role in it, and it's not like everything they did is bad. So when you hear me talking about things like, oh, there's continuity in this power structure, they just change methods, that's not me saying that like everyone in all these institutions involved with this are evil. But if you look at the core families involved with the papacy, they are direct descendants of these Roman patrician families. It just goes from hard militaristic power to when it came to, so the unifier with that core of the Roman power structure would be the Catholic Church. And if you look at electorate systems in the Holy Roman Empire, if you look at the shire courts in Anglo-Saxon England and later on Norman England, if like you'd have a lot of overlap in politics with bishops and with the whole clerical structure. And I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but a lot of medieval Europe, like you'll hear people criticizing feudalism, and you'll hear people criticizing the Middle Ages as if like it was this giant centralized authoritarian hellhole. I kind of used to swallow some of that propaganda a little bit, but the picture is a little bit more complicated than that. The way the power structure continued is there would be an interesting kind of tug of war between the monarchs, the local aristocrats, and the church itself. And where that tug of war can get a little interesting is with the local aristocrats, because like if you look at my tweets and me saying, oh, like the aristocracy did this, the aristocracy is doing this, it can make it look like I'm saying that they're all automatically evil. And in this kind of system, there can still be a good bit of self-interest involved. But if you think about what aristocrats want to do, they want to maintain a good reputation. and they want to be able to pass down favorable positions to their children and their descendants. So it makes sense that they're going to want to do things that are popular to people, that they're going to a lot of times want to do things that will actually benefit the people and not completely exploit them. And like I said, it's like there can be totally self-serving interests for them. But whenever the monarch or the church would want to do something that would be unpopular with their locals, they would have incentives to go against them. So when you had this power structure go from hard militaristic power to like mixed hard power, soft power, where it's like you'd have some kings who were integrated in it, some kings who are more in bed with the core Roman structure than others, and then you had some aristocrats who were on the periphery, but other ones who were in on it. That kind of thing can create a lot of loose ends. And where I'm going with the conflict between local aristocrats and other more remote and centralized powers is that's one of the things that gave rise to the Protestant Reformation. Can you hear me? Did I mute?
Yep, we
Hey,
can hear you. We can hear you.
how long was I muted?
For like 1 second. You're fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I saw that speech bubble there. Okay, yeah, but yeah, pretty much it's like what I'm trying to push back against is that like this what I call power structure. It's like I see a lot of framing that it's like absolutely top down organized, that like all major events, everything is just orchestrated, everything's a psyop. There are some major events you can look at, and that's definitely the case. But I definitely push back on that framework a little bit too. I don't think it's completely top down organized. I think once you get into there, it's kind of like the world that we live in is a demiurgic prison. Everything about our society is just fake. It can be very doomeristic. It can be very disenfranchising, right? I don't want to go there, but like I said, with that whole give and take, where there'd be some loose ends popping up with local aristocrats. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why the Protestant Reformation kicked off, because the Protestant Reformation. There's like this idea that it's like you had Martin Luther come along. He's this theology nerd, and he debates Catholic theology nerds, and then the people just side with Martin Luther, and then you have them break away from Rome and the Catholic Church. But like there was a good bit more going on there. It's like you had German princes who are already butting heads with Rome and butting heads with some of the monarchs and like the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperors. They're like, hey, wait a second, these guys have a lot of money. We kind of want this. So if we side with this, we can end up taking some of these guys' assets, and that's exactly what happened. And before the Reformation, when you look at Northern Europe and the kind of cultures that developed Protestantism, you already had a more meritocratic frameworks coming up where you had power less decided by nepotism or simony and more by merit, and a lot of the power broking and bureaucracy would actually be derived from trade guilds. And it's interesting. There actually is a good bit of overlap with trade guilds and precursors to what would become Freemasonry. And you can see like I follow a lot of Freemason accounts on social media, and they will like show screenshots and bragging about how like many forms of modern government are and bureaucracies were created and crafted by Freemasons. So it's kind of like this guild merchant class which got prominence through meritocracy in Northern Europe, taking prominence over more aristocratic and clerical type frameworks that would be more dominant over in Southern Europe. Because like if you look at the more aristocratic culture, it's like I'm not saying Northern Europe didn't have aristocratic elements, but it's like power would be more contained to bloodlines. It would be more based on inheritance. And if you look at precursors to like corporations in places like Spain during colonialism, it would be in a lot of ways state run, and it would be mostly like local aristocrats running it. There wouldn't be as much room for upward mobility as you would have in places like the English system. So fast forward over to Rothschild and over a lot of these Jewish families taking prominence. It's like Jews were barred from these trade guilds, but they were still integrated into the merchant class in other ways, especially as bankers and financiers, because like banking was considered a lowly, dirty job. And also, it's like through the Middle Ages and especially under Catholic canon law, Christians aren't allowed to charge other Christians interest, but they get around that by putting these court Jew benefactors in charge of banking. And that way also, whenever like there'd be some kind of like financial scandal breaking forth, you have these Jews in place that can be blamed for all the conspiracies to really get eyes off the aristocracy, monarchs, or whoever else is commissioning them. And there would be overlap with things like the slave trade and actual concerning criminal activity. So it's like a lot of this conspiracy stuff where we see the Rothschilds like being framed as taking over the world, and we see like the Jew like they're saying like, oh well, like the Jews are literally behind every conspiracy and they have absolute power and took over the world now. A lot of that comes from older literature because there would be reasons to point the finger at them. It's just that given their front and center positions in banking, and partly because like the whole power structure would incentivize them to be in roles like that, it's very easy to find literature like that and spin it and make what I'd argue are incomplete narratives. And that's not to say that Rothschild is not powerful, that they're irrelevant, or that you can't like find major Jews involved with big think tanks that would you know be rolling out things like the Federal Reserve, or things that there are genuine conspiracies involved with. Because it's like if you read Creature for Jekyll Island, for instance, it's pretty obvious that the Federal Reserve and the whole central banking apparatus that runs the world right now, and the petrodollar system, it's like all these things were decided by and were determined in closed doors before they were implemented. And there are conspiracies, and it's like you can certainly find Jews involved with that stuff. I just argue that you're not really looking at the full picture. And Rothschild is the famous one to say they're the ones behind all this. But the way I put it is, I was giving all this background is because there is a sense in which there's a continuity in power in which you can find like the same old families in charge of things. In fact, I was posting, I think I'm bad at remembering foreign names. I think his name is like Giuliano Colonna, from the Colonna family. It's like the Colonna family goes back to the Julia Claudians. I was posting about how this guy was like the head of the European Commission, and he was also Deputy Secretary General of NATO. But the guy who was Secretary General was like ill all the time and impotent. So it's like this guy was like overseeing all the CIA briefings with NATO, especially during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was responsible for the Kelowna Memorandum, which like pretty much gave like the financial infrastructure of the European Commission to start creating the European Union. Because it's like one of the big loose ends for the European Union was like a lot of the countries had more autonomous finance, and it would be hard to like integrate all these corporations. So the Kelowna Memorandum would be one of the things that got away with that. And like that's just an example of like a powerful family that's been kind of in this like top positions, going with a continuity going back 2,000 years. And it's very easy to prove that with him, because it's like you can't really get much higher than running NATO and the European Union. But though, when things change from more military focused power, then more to religious clericalism, education, then you start getting into finance, mercantilism, meritocracy. You are going to bring in new bloods, and especially when meritocracy becomes a thing. Jews and Rothschild would have come from a Jewish community. and Mayor Amschel Rothschild, who is their founder, it's like he would be taking from lessons from the Talmud and reading it regularly and integrating some of that in his practices. So it's like there's definitely something there. Um, it makes sense why people who would be practiced and skilled at things would be promoted. So Mayor Amschel Rothschild, who founded the Rothschild family, it's like he was promoted by the House of Hesse, and then his five sons would go to other major European banking centers. And it's like there's narratives that they like just took over everything, subverted all these governments, but once you start getting into the details, it's like they are actually being rewarded noble and honorary titles to give themselves bona fides and credibility with other elites there. So it's like I don't really see much evidence for this whole like they secretly subverted and took over everything. It looks more like they were good at banking. They were good with finance. They were good at financial wizardry. And as the power structure would move more to like central banking and things like that, they'd get promoted for those reasons. So in the, like I said in the beginning, in the piece that I wrote up for Matt, I focus on the five Rothschild arrows and their progeny, and then getting promoted through aristocratic institutions and aristocratic networks. But for I'm going to be releasing a video on that where I'm going to read this, and I had to delay that because my computer got messed up. But what I did for this one is I focused more on the sources of misinformation and about Rothschild taking over everything. And the main figure who that is focused on is going to be Nathan Rothschild of the London branch. And there's pretty obvious reasons for that. It's like the London market. It was pretty much like Wall Street before Wall Street. It's like the Lombard Street, which is named after these like Lombard merchants and bankers from Italy. That was literally the original Wall Street, and that came around in the 11th century. Shortly, this is another rabbit hole. This is a little bit tangential, but you like. But in the Middle Ages, it's like you would have prominent Jewish bankers, but like Lombards would actually be far worse with usury and charging other Christians interest, even though they were like on paper Christians. They were actually far worse than the Jewish bankers, but they were actually more protected and were able to get away with more. And then the Knights Templar themselves got smarter with it, but they pretty much like inherited the whole Lombard banking system and took it to a whole new level with like where you're able to like write and deposit checks all over. Like if the Knights Templar have a bank over in the Holy Land and they also have a bank over in England, you can like transfer checks between those territories. That was a rather like new innovation for them. But yeah, it's like it's interesting because the Lombards came over and started these banking institutions that were integrated with the Normans after the Normans took over England, and they created Lombard Street, which is pretty much the OG Wall Street. And then shortly after that, the Knights Templar came over. They became King Henry II's bankers, and their financial headquarters were over in London. It would be the Crown Temple, and the Crown Temple is a little bit of a nickname, but the Crown Temple is pretty much like Lord Mayor of London, Inns of Courts, the inner and middle temples, and also the Temple Church. But yeah, that would have been the Knights Templar financial base of operations. The master of the temple there before the Knights Templar were disbanded. They'd be like the first baron, one of the most privileged positions in English Parliament. That place would like house papal legates. They'd also, whenever the Norman monarchs would want to seize assets of local aristocrats, they'd hold their assets over there because they had papal charters that gave them extra legal immunity. And this actually stands today. It's like London, the city of London itself. It's pretty much like it's legally autonomous from the rest of England, essentially. Now, it's not going to be like where it's like on paper its own self-contained country like the Vatican City is from the rest of Italy. It's not quite like that, but there are extra legal loopholes going on there where you can conceal dirty money operations. And in the Temple Church, which was like the Knights Templar financial headquarters after this, it has like a whole nother degree or layer of financial immunity. And I'd argue after the Knights Templar were suppressed that it stayed a very big deal. It's like you have major banking centers and centers for developing maritime law and things that the British Empire be known for in places like Valencia, Spain, and also Venice, Genoa. Those are pretty famous, but I'd argue that the Knights Templar and their offshoots and various secret societies that would be active all over Europe after their suppression, leading up to the Reformation and the formation of the British East India Company, I'd argue they were staying active over in London. That's why their finance is such a big deal, and also why the Rothschild London branch has such a privileged position. And yeah, I one of the reasons why I wanted to have notes in front of me is because I just completely went off topic and was all over the place. And right now I'm about to, oh, do you want to say something with sound that you're showing up on camera?
No, man, I just want to say that I'm a big fan of the segue. You just context is everything, so don't worry about it. And no, keep it going, man. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, I wanna start focusing on Nathan Rothschild, the London branch, because that's where, and I will briefly, I think I'm going to briefly at the end of it, I have some notes tacked on that just briefly goes over the other Rothschild branches, but it's not going to go over as much detail as the chapter I sent Matt. So there's going to be enough for me there to get into it in Q&A when we open it up. But because Rothschild are very relevant, very prominent bankers, they were promoted to aristocrats. It's like I am not downplaying them. I am not saying that they are just these poor paupers who really aren't all that relevant. Because I've been accused that next. I have been accused that next, and I've been like, I actually think there's layers above Rothschild, and it's like there's a reason why like you have all these conspiracies about them, and you hardly have anyone talking about, people like that Colonna family that I brought up. It's because the people above them are more insulated and protected. I've had people like strawman me and say that I'm saying that they're like just irrelevant, just like figurehead puppets or whatever, and that's not what I'm saying either. I'm just saying that there's layers of insulation and there's different roles. It's like when it comes to liquidity management for the system, I'd say Rothschild is at the very top there. Now, how much they actually control the money that they manage and circulate, or at least own it, it's like they definitely do well for themselves. They definitely can profit and be able to get property, and they definitely have secret assets that are hidden. So it's very hard to know their net worth. But one of the things that contradicts this whole takeover narrative is that, like, if you look at their private communications, it's like Nathan Rothschild will be lecturing his brothers on like, hey, if you want to get property, you need to do it this way. It's like I do very well for myself, and you can do very well for yourself too. But they'll talk about like needing to give account for various central banks, like needing to account to the Central Bank of Belgium, needing to account to the Central Bank of England. So it's like if they were just like taking over and all this money was going to themselves, and all this money was just something that they're completely autonomous over, they wouldn't be talking like that, and they wouldn't need to report what they're doing to other people. And they did have a vast intelligence network, especially through couriers, and later on, like they were very early on in investing in the telegram system when telegrams and telephones would be developing. So it's like they definitely were able to communicate information very fast. And some of their methods would actually be implemented into like the CIA and MI6, because it's like there's a lot of ties to Wall Street and bankers with the CIA, MI6, current military intelligence agencies. It's like the Rockefeller family. They were like on paper heads of the Council on Foreign Relations, and you like that. That's one of the managing apparatus for the CIA. They also had Chase Bank, so it's like you'll be able to find all kinds of connections of bankers and intelligence, and like the Rothschild model would be integrated into that, especially through their role in the Rhodes Milner Roundtable. Which that's a whole other subject. But if you want to look into the Rhodes Milner Roundtable, a mainstream historian who gets into this is Carroll Quigley. He was like Bill Clinton's mentor at Jesuit Georgetown University, and he was an archivist for the Council on Foreign Relations. And he also has a book. He also has a book called like The Anglo-American Established, where he'll talk about these roundtable groups and how like these British roundtables would feed into like the modern American banking and intel apparatus. It's pretty interesting. So it's like he's not going to tell you everything because he's an archivist for the establishment, and it's like he definitely wants to cover some people's asses. But after he published some of these books, it's like you had some of the people involved with these circles go like, come on, dude, you might have said a little bit too much. But anyways, Rothschild definitely has a lot of big roles. They're definitely big in intelligence. They definitely had a lot of influence over how intelligence agencies were formed today. Their practices and their ideas would be implemented in institutions like the Federal Reserve. I just think the role that they were behind it all in the brains and shot callers is exaggerated. But so before we dive into their actual history, let's get into where these takeover stories come from, because this is what I want to focus on. Because once you start looking at where these narratives that you see repeated online and on X come from about like all these various like takeover myths, it actually becomes pretty ironic and hilarious, because it's so easy to track and debunk, but it's like people keep posting memes and they'll like write these long post analysis, and also it's like a lot of this comes from forgeries and made up stuff that was circulated in like the 1870s or 1840s. I think the first one came up in the 1840s. Yeah, that it's right here. And what you have is you have a bunch of fake stuff come up in the literature. So you have someone writing a decade after that quoting fake things, and they have a lot of elaborate looking arguments. Then someone else comes up and starts quoting it, and they make elaborate arguments after that and add to it. So then you have this like whole giant body of literature with a bunch of like fake misrepresented bullcrap, but someone can come along and quote a lot of it on X or YouTube and look really smart, like, oh my gosh, he's read all these books, he really knows what he's talking about. But it's like all baloney. And yeah, that's what can get a little frustrating in these kind of discussions. So the most persistent one and the source of all this, which is repeated endlessly online, it centers on Nathan Rothschild, the London one. He's like supposedly masterminded a financial coup d'etat after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So according to this legend, Nathan was the original source this came from. Not everyone X says this, but you got to remember where this information came from. It claims that Nathan was personally at the battlefield of Waterloo and witnessed Wellington's victory over Napoleon. Then he raced across the English Channel in this dramatic storm where he was bribing sailors, and he arrived in London a day before the official news. And then he sold British government's bonds to crash the market as if Napoleon had actually won, then bought them back cheap with pennies to the dollar and made a fortune. And they claim that like he made tens of millions, which is absolutely false. Like there's no financial records at the time whatsoever that even indicate that. And like the Rothschild archives, which actually have the numbers, completely disprove that. And then that let the family own England and dominate finance moving forward. Now, it is true, like I said, I brought up that Rothschild had a vast courier system. They had an intelligence network. So they were among the first to get news of this. But like Nathan Rothschild was never at the battlefield whatsoever. So this actually appears in an 1846 pamphlet, which would happen. That's like 31 years after the battle, and it was titled Historiae Edificante et Curioso di Rothschild. I, it's here's how you say it. It's translates to edifying and curious history of Rothschild, King of the Jews, and its author is Matthew George Den Dairnvel Darnivel. I'm so bad with French names. It's like I have to hear it pronounced a couple times to be able to say it right. But yeah, I showed it on the screen for a little bit, and I've posted about this guy, and he was like this kind of early communist pamphleteer, and he wrote under the pseudonym Satan. All right, and this he wrote this after you had outrage over this railway derailment over at the Du Nord line that was in Paris. So you had a train derailment in 1846 near Fampoux, so Fampous, because like they for some reason the French like to put X at the end of things, which English don't pronounce the same way. And this accident would actually end up killing like dozens of people and injured a lot more. And the Rothschild family were major investors in logistics operations, especially the railway network in France. So there was already public outrage. There was already a level of suspicion on the Rothschild family. So he framed the Rothschilds as profiteers who prioritized money over safety, because you know it's like around industrialization. That's a really common trope. It's like you have these evil capitalist overlords who don't care about worker safety, and there can be a good bit of truth to that. There can be a good bit of truth to it. And he tied this into Jewish question debates about the Jewish roles in finance and society. And like I said, like there's a large body of literature already on that subject to begin with. So you can have some true things. Maybe there was some sloppy oversight over the railroad derailment, but that was the impetus for it. Some of that could be true, but if there's true things in there, that's going to make the bull crap look more believable. So yeah, there's a long-standing tradition of blaming Jews for pretty much like all the conspiracies and economic woes. So back then in the 1840s, you had banking houses becoming more dominant, and you had more of these like worker kinds of misfits. So that would mishaps, and that would grow anger over industrialization incidents. So the Rothschilds became the symbols for the evil capitalist forces that people saw as disrupting traditional orders. So the Waterloo Tale became this centerpiece in this pamphlet, and it's like this it has like unsubstantiated claims that Nathan Rothschild was at Waterloo, which didn't happen. And as soon as he saw the Allied victory, he rushed over to England, and he bribed sailors to reach there. Then he reached London 24 hours ahead, which I already covered. And he used exclusive knowledge to sell government bonds, drive the prices down as if the defeat was coming, and bought massively for enormous profit. And allegedly, he made 20 billion francs in one single coup. And like I said, none of this matches the record whatsoever. Nathan was at London the whole time, and he was coordinating the British family's operations for war-related finance. So it's like that is true. He was receiving intelligence, but there is absolutely no evidence that he was at Waterloo. There is no evidence that he even spread lies of defeat to crash the stock market whatsoever. And what's even funnier is contemporary weather reports and shipping records show that there is absolutely no storm that would have matched the time where he was actually claiming that this happened. So like I said, the Rothschilds did have an intelligence network, but news of the victory came to London through multiple couriers and agents of the London's family network. But also, it's like you had people with the British government and like the precursors of the British intelligence apparatus who also would receive news of this relatively early. So it's not like everyone was just in the dark while Rothschild were the only ones who knew about this. And there was no deliberate market manipulation to crash prices. And if you actually look at the bond movements at the time, and you can actually see this in like the Rothschild archives themselves, and also like sources that don't have any stewardship with them. So it's like the bond movements were relatively modest, and any positioning reflected just like normal merchant banking activity amid wartime uncertainty. It's like with wartime uncertainty, you can have like prices fluctuate a little bit more than normal, but nothing like the kind of profits that were reported whatsoever. So the Rothschilds, though, where they did come to prominence is they had actually taken risks earlier by stockpiling bullion exchanges on a longer campaign. And this created costs when peace came subtly. So like they were able to make a good bit of profit, but their real gains in this period came from sustained long-term contracted services supplying gold to Wellington's army. All right. And you can actually find, I showed Matt this and I posted this on X. It's like and Rothschild's communications with his other brothers like James, he's like, I must go get this gold for Wellington. It's like if you look at their private communications, it's like when the Rothschilds are being integrated into their local elite, it's like they have a sense of patriotism to it, not patriotism to the countries they're getting integrated to, but to the patriotism among like the whole upper class they're becoming a part of. And so but like this is long-term, high volume, high risk work that the government needed at the time, because if you hear about public-private partnerships with the World Economic Forum, Rothschild to kind of be like a precursor to that, where it's like you started bringing in like these skilled merchants and bankers and integrating them into state operations, but it's like still on paper kind of like these quasi private corporations. So yeah, like a bunch of this made up stuff though that like misrepresents all this came up in this 1846 pamphlet that was spread widely and was translated into a bunch of languages, and became like the foundation for all these conspiracy narratives on Rothschild, which are now like circulating on X and being repeated all over YouTube. So yeah, like what's really funny about this is if you look at the conspiracy narratives, a lot of them will end up claiming that Rothschild was like behind communism, because like Mayor Amschel Rothschild, he was involved with the World Revolutionary Movement, which came around in 1776, and you would have founders of the Illuminati involved with this. So it's like there definitely would be an involvement with some like closed door conspiracies and revolutionary movements, but people will run with that to like say that Karl Marx and Frederick Engels and like the First International was a Rothschild operation, and these guys were Rothschild agents. But what gets really funny is Frederick Engels, and this was like one of Marx's main financiers, and I'd argue one of his ghostwriters and handlers. He was writing in the Northern Star in September 1846, so a few months a few months after this came out, he was actually praising the Satan pamphlets. He was praising the Satan pamphlets, and him and Karl Marx's circles with like the developing First International, the early communist movements, they were actually circulating the stuff, and they were promoting Rothschild as like the figureheads of evil capitalism. So it's like Rothschild was in control of these people who were pointing to them as the villains and spreading conspiracy slop about them. I mean, that doesn't really add up. It doesn't add up. And they highlighted this as a clever way to go after financiers. And James Rothschild, who was the head of the French France, he replied with his own pamphlet where he ended up defending the family also. So it's like, you could say there could be some like pro Rothschild propaganda circulating around there also. So it's like, if you start looking into these sources, you want to be careful of misinformation going to both extremes. But the left-wing communist socialist circles amplified these anti-Rothschild attacks as a way to like they had these like larger critiques of banking elites and capitalism, because you had something called the July monarchy come up in France at this time a few months ago, and like it would all be coinciding with like a lot of this outrage around industrialization and these railroad movements that were going on. So, but yeah, these more modern conspiracy theories that come from the Jewish question types, they claim that Karl Marx, communism, and socialism were secretly controlled by the Rothschilds and this Jewish cabal, and they paint picture that like the Rothschild family was funding both sides of every conflict to dominate the world. But the historical record actually shows that that's like the exact opposite. In this case, the early socialists and communists were circulating and boosting attacks against the Rothschild family. And the Rothschilds became like symbols of the exploitative financial capitalists of the left, as opposed to like actually puppeteering the left. So what it's like these contradictions and these discrepancies between like how things are reported and what actually happened. What's going on is like these theories are pretty much cherry picking things, and running like what they're pretty much doing is they're looking at evidence that will support like this totalize and control narrative, and they plug it into this framework where you can pick facts that are convenient for it, omit facts for another one, and then you can impose storytelling in it, make it look really plausible. And if you don't actually check like the sources and counter evidence, it can look really appealing, and it becomes kind of unfalsifiable too, because when you have this input output feedback system that relies on confirmation bias, and it's like you can find some true things that happened over here, but you're saying like, oh, well, there's actually a conspiracy. So like if you find things that contradict this, it's part of the operation. That becomes really difficult for people to really see past, because if you present counter evidence, they can just say, well, you're just looking at misinformation. You're just looking at fabricated stuff yourself. So it's like that gives them plausible deniability to not want to listen to you or any counter evidence if you have any pushback against them. And it kind of creates like this whole self-contained ecosystem that becomes like immune to self-critique and intellectual revision. And that kind of thing, I think, can become pretty dangerous, especially when it's like you're making these reductionistic narratives about total control, which don't really match reality. And it gets more dangerous when average everyday people who don't have anything to do with power end up getting lumped into it, which I'd argue is exactly what the Jewish question type narratives do, because it's like I see people saying that like Jews and Zionists in the abstract, and Zionism becomes like this thing where it can have multiple definitions. It can just mean someone who like vaguely supports Israel or whatever, or someone who it's like that's completely different from like getting into debates about the role in the geopolitics. But anyone who like would come across somewhat favorably to them, I've seen people like end up advocating for them straight up being deported, and that kind of sentiment is going around quite a lot more. So though back to Nathan Rothschild, though, back to what I was saying about them being promoted through meritocracy, is they were very good at providing money lending services and liquidity management across various industries, because the Rothschild family, they ended up diversifying their money management portfolio and how many industries they were involved in pretty early on. So Mayer Rothschild, who was like their founder, he had contributions in Britain which centered around strengthening the London bond market. And not Mayer Rothschild, sorry, Nathan Rothschild. And he ended up delivering essential services to the British government. And following the Napoleonic Wars, he became the underwriter and dealer in government securities. So his international family network gave him an edge in efficiently issuing and trading bonds for Britain as well as other European powers such as Prussia. And this helped channel capital for infrastructure, trade, and the state's needs for greater liquidity confidence. And a big moment which came about in the 1825 liquidity crisis, so you had British banks, they ended up facing severe pressure after they ended up having widespread speculation in Latin America following like all these various revolutions down there. And investments led to defaults and created this massive financial panic. So reserves at the Bank of England ran critically low. So Nathan Rothschild's firm ended up stepping in, and he ended up supplying a large volume of gold to stabilize the situation. And he'd get this from Belgium and his French France. And this intervention helped avoid a broader financial collapse that threatened the entire British banking system. So this was like, what people will say is because he bailed out the Bank of England, he ended up taking total control. The Rothschilds became the dominant shareholders. But this was like, this wasn't some act of control. It's like the crown, the British government, they actually paid him to do this. And what it did was it earned Nathan Rothschild a strong reputation as a reliable force in the city of London. Like I said, he's being promoted through the network for meritocracy. It's like not this kind of secret takeover. So it's like there can be if like this whole system is a conspiratorial hierarchy and they're involved with conspiratorial intelligence operations. It's like someone with a role like this in a family like this, them or their descendants are going to be involved with some kind of conspiracies, no doubt. But like, they had to report and coordinate the money they were handling and moving, like I said earlier. So especially like in their dealings tied to government contracts and bullion flows, it's like they had to account for everything they were doing with all the money they were managing. It's like there really wasn't much of a layer of secrecy going on here. And they functioned as merchant bankers within established rules, established laws, and aristocratic relationships that they were brought into. And they weren't like this unregulated power that was above the system, taking it over from like outside and within. So Nathan Rothschild, he inherited and expanded a barren role in the bond market, and he acted as a major dealer and underwriter. But this was not like just exclusive or domineering. He became the head of the bond market, like the Rothschild in London became the biggest bond brokers. but they inherited this from the barons. They were kind of like the Rothschilds, the bond market before them. They had similar roles, and the London bond market's strength was pretty much rooted in Britain's own economic power, like the British East India Company, with like mixed government oversight from Parliament and older frameworks from the city of London's ancient livery institutions. When the liveries are something to get into for another time, because there's quite a lot going on there. But Nathan Rothschild never once took over the Bank of England or British finance. And the Rothschilds, what they did is they had international reach that various governments and institutions needed and would recruit them for. But ultimate direction and authority stayed within this older aristocratic dynastic, and in the context of Britain, parliamentary structures. So Nathan's approach was one of loyal service to the crown's needs, as reflected in his correspondence. And this reliability and steady growth ended up growing his reputation and his own firm's position. So Nathan Rothschild was this highly competent money manager who aligned with and strengthened pre-existing power structures as they were updating from aristocratic models to meritocratic models. So he and his family earned integration through influence and integration through reliability and results. All right. So the Rothschilds became honored participants within this network. And the specific myth that the Rothschild family ended up taking over the Bank of England has a traceable evolution. So this began with 19th century exaggerations of Nathan's role in the 1825 liquidity crisis. Then as the family's wealth visibly grew, you had more pamphleteers coming out, and they would portray like any level of Rothschild financial involvement as evidence of like secret domination. So then by the late 19th century, the late 1800s and early 1900s and 20th century, you'd have this being merged with a whole new genre of conspiracy literature. Like you'd have stuff like this showing up in the Protocols, the Elders of Zion, which is like constantly facelifted forgeries, which go back to like pamphlets against the Huguenots. It's like they just get like new updates, change things around until it became like this Jewish question stuff pushed by the czars in Russia, but it circulated through France before it went over to Russia. And it frequently listed as the Bank of England as one of the institutions that was captured by this international Jewish Rothschild cabal, with Rothschild as the ringleaders of it. So then in the 1930s, you had Nazi propaganda amplify this. So you had this this film called Die Rothschilds, DIE. It's a German film, and it's directed by Eric Waschencheck, and it focused on the same Waterloo legend, but also implied it also included a Rothschild takeover of the Bank of England. And after World War II, this myth ends up persisting through what you might call, what I call it now, the pretty much the new right, like this idea that like we need to sort of go back to a modernized version of these old feudalistic institutions, and we need to bring back these old medieval usury codes. And yeah, those are the kind of demographics that will end up circulating this kind of thing. So these accounts completely lack these accounts. They don't have backing from any kind of primary sources whatsoever. And by the late 20th century, by the time you had the internet coming around, this movement starts spreading online. So I want to wrap this up I saw Matt getting into opening things for Q&A. It's like I do have a little bit more I could get into,
You
but
you
one
Mike, go for it. I'm just getting people to prepare their brains to pose questions, but you just finish your composition as you see fit.
All right. Well, one thing, yeah. One thing I wanted to get at though is that there's a common narrative. There's a common narrative I see going around that the Rothschild family bought the blood rights to the British crown. This started coming up around the 90s, around the time when you had the internet moving around, and you have like these conversations coming up on forums. So this this thing appears like in QAnon circles now. So if you see people like saying that you know the Prince William is really the son of Jacob Rothschild, and that like the British crown was actually taken over by the Rothschild family, and they bought out their blood rights. This comes from David Hallett. He claims that he's really the rightful heir to the British crown, and that the Rothschild family is one of the people who subverted his bloodline. Um, if you actually look in the primary sources and historical evidence, there is absolutely no record whatsoever, not even a hint of a hidden covenant of dynastic rights. All right. But David Hallett, he's positioned himself as the relevator of this ancient and modern power structure, because he's claiming that he should rightly be the king of England. All right. And his material ends up integrating these early Nathan post Waterloo narratives, and he ends up bringing this to them, taking over the British bloodline. And he literally like actually has claimed to be a messiah before. If you hold on, I'm gonna have to take my face off it because I have this pulled up on X. Let me see. Hallett.
Is this Joseph Gregory Hallett?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Hold on. Gregory. Yeah. There it is. Yeah. Yeah. Would I be able to put it on the split screen?
I don't know. We should have done a little technical check first. What you can do is though is send me the link, and I could share it on my side if you send me the link by like chat or
Yeah.
text or
Yeah.
something.
Here. Yeah. Let me do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll just read it. I'll just read it. So he claims to be King John the Third, and he he it's funny. It's like if you open that up, you can see like these fake looking legal documents he has set out to make it look like he has this legitimate claim to the throne. And he actually he he has this he claims to be the Mashiach, Christ Messiah, and it's kind of like this take on the whole Jewish Messiah thing. And let me see. Yeah, so the discussions of the group set to promote Hallett and his supporters search for clues in current events that might indicate his imminent ascent to the throne. In October of 2019, one of the ornamental crests of the gates of Buckingham Palace was damaged in a delivery truck and removed from repair. Its absence was noted and viewed as a sign that the Queen had already been deposed and or executed. So like, and this also gets into like, oh, like Pope Francis and Queen Elizabeth are like hologram quite type claims. It's like around 2020, I actually, before I was even really getting into researching this stuff, I'd actually end up seeing this guy come up on my feed, and I think his name was Simon Parks. they'd be saying like all kinds of nonsense, and he'd be setting dates for his return to the British throne, while like other of these QAnon guys would be like, Donald Trump will be reinstated on March 15th of 2021. But these QAnon circles end up like spreading a lot of these repackaged myths, and around this, or like around like the Rothschild family, the Waterloo takeover, them taking over the Bank of England. So that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. But like a lot of these people who repeat this stuff will call QAnon a psyop, which is absolutely true. But like that's where this genre came from. And around the same time, during like the COVID 2020 lockdowns, one of the most popular pieces in this genre, it doesn't really deal with the Rothschild family directly, but you have the learned protocols. Is my camera back on?
No, you got to turn it back on.
Okay, my bad. Yeah. But it's like you have like the learned protocols for the Elder of Zion. It's like back to your COVID lockdowns. It's like you had a lot of agitation because it's like during 2020, it's like you had a lot of illegitimate government activity. It's like you had the lockdowns. You end up having several companies and governments having vaccine mandates, and a lot of people were skeptical of that. So it makes sense that a lot of people are going to want to get into the conspiracy genre and go like, wow, who's really behind this illegitimate thing? And at this time, the FBI tweeted out the protocols for the Elders of Zion. The FBI tweeted out that protocols the Elders of Zion, and then they deleted it, and they were like, oopsies, that was our mistake. I think they were doing that on purpose. It's like, yeah, like I think the protocols and
Well,
these various pamphlets.
Elon Musk also had his Grok AI also promoting Hitler and the protocols, and then it was like retracted, and there was an apology, like there was a glitch in the system, but it definitely put something, it charged something into the zeitgeist of users who are interfacing with this thing too. So there's also that.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think it's intentional, and I think the pamphlets going back to this with like the Satan pamphlets and then onwards. I think that these are all various intelligence operations, because it's like given the kind of role the Rothschild family has, and also various others of these like high level Jewish financiers that end up showing up on like the Forbes top 100 billionaire list. It's like they can be important and powerful and have like a level of autonomy in their own right, but given their high level visibility, they're pretty easy to scapegoat and point the finger at. While like the actual powers, it's like even when they're in front and center institutions, like head of the European Commission, head of NATO, you don't really hear about them as much, and that's because they have a higher degree of insulation. And also, it's like I don't really think that the Rothschild family really is even all that harmed by these conspiracies. I think they kind of like laugh at it, because it's like, really, like what's going to happen to them? Like nothing really. But oh, let me hold on. But there is just one more thing I wanted to pull up, because this is a little bit relevant. I got this from Toby. He goes by Truth or Justice on X. So one thing that does show up in the Epstein interviews is he repeatedly does say that he represents the Rothschilds, and it's like that really shouldn't be that surprising. It's like Epstein was kind of like this blackmail finance guy, and he was highly connected to British intelligence, and he would also work with some figures in Israeli intelligence and Israeli interests. So um, if you can get this on the screen, let me show it to you. I just sent it to you on Messenger, on X. But yeah, Epstein was already under investigation by the FBI in 2006 when Sir John Sewers, he was the MI6 head, Sir John Sowers, the MI6 had visited him in his New York home in 2011. Then in 2016, he sent the email to Thiel that he represents the Rothschilds, but it's like, remember, the FBI posted out the protocols for the Elders of Zion, and the FBI is also the ones who ended up curating the release of these Epstein networks. And Peter Thiel himself has a contract with the UK government through the same MI6 head Sowers back in 2019. And yeah, like what Toby argues is that the Rothschild family have become the smokescreen for British intelligence and their larger banking apparatus to hide their subterfuge and subversion against the world. And the FBI, it's kind of funny that the FBI chose not to redact whatsoever in the Epstein files that, oh, hey, I represent the Rothschilds. Okay, you have that pulled up. Oh, did you pull up the Toby one? Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Peter Thiel, Jeffrey Epstein communication.
Yeah. It's like they redact. There's a bunch of names in there that we redact and we can't find, but they chose not to redact or curate. Oh, I represent the Rothschild family. I wonder why that is.
Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, but it's like I'm not saying that they are irrelevant, and it's like they are known for being really powerful for a reason. It's like I think that they had a lot of skill in money lending. But another thing that's worth mentioning when it comes to them not running the Bank of England, it's like Alfred Rothschild, he would be Nathan Rothschild grandson. He's the highest ranking Rothschild to ever be in the Bank of England. And it's like he was their second in command. He was like their deputy director. He wasn't even their general. And it's like there really is not any kind of documentation whatsoever of the Rothschild family having like any shares in the Bank of England. The Bank of England itself, it's kind of like this hybrid of parliamentary governmental ownership, and also you have like some monarch partial ownership in there. You have like various lords, parliamentarians, people in the Privy Council, and also just like straight up London corporations partially owning it. And I do think there'll be hidden ownership going back to like various of these livery guilds and fraternities. Now that's a little speculative. It's really hard to prove ownership in the liveries. It's like what you want to look for. What you want to look for is like because these liveries are like high level initiatory fraternities. It's like you'll find a lot of the people who are like heads of Freemasonry of various like Masonic splinters or rites who would also serve like 1-year terms as presidents of the various liveries. And you'll also see them like launching charities that are involved with various companies. It's like the Tallow Chandler's livery is highly involved with like the BP oil company and Shell gas, for instance. And you'll find overlap. You'll find overlap with people like running and managing those institutions, but it's like it's really hard to tell. It's like we do know that these liveries they are high level guilds that in a lot of ways are precursors of Freemasonry and developed like our current corporate like aristocratic structure. But that's the kind of thing, like it's really easy to find stuff on Rothschild, but like it's really hard to find stuff on them. It's like if you look at their members, you can see a lot of members who are really big deals, and it's like you can see collusion. Like if you look at the International Bankers livery, it's like that. Okay, so back to back, so HSBC and the Lloyd's Bank in London, they're like on paper rivals. But if you look at International Bankers livery, it's like 1 year the head of Lloyd's Bank was the president of the International Bankers livery, and it's like the next year the head of HSBC was. So like, this is like a fraternal organization where like they have like pancake breakfast, kind of like what you hear about like Freemason lodges where they like hang out and be friends and things. So a lot of like the stuff that goes on there is off the records, but there's a lot of reason to think that these guys are like the top corporate owners and the top owners of the Bank of England. It's going to be completely hybrid. It's not just going to be like one livery. It's not just going to be one institution. It's going to be this kind of hidden. You can find evidence of it, but no kind of smoking guns. Network in London that has higher degrees of legal immunity than pretty much like anywhere in the world. Like the two places, or no, there are several places like this. It's like Monaco has a high level of legal immunity, but that's a lot of that has to do with like laundering money through casinos and their yacht club over there. Switzerland, it's like everyone talks about like offshore Swiss bank accounts. The Vatican City, it's like the Vatican Bank is one of the most secretive institutions in the world. It's like almost impossible. Like actually, Pope John Paul I tried auditing the Vatican Bank, and he was like killed for it. So and that also goes to show that even people at the level of Pope can become a loose end. So that kind of disproves that like these people always have absolute power, and or, like everyone in every position is just a total puppet and does whatever they're told. It's like you wouldn't have assassinations like that if that was the case. You have other random places like Gibraltar or Liechtenstein, but in terms of the ones that have like the most authority and have highest level of legal immunity, I would argue that is the financial district of the city of London, and also Vatican City. I mean, and it's like one of the reasons why, like, this is a little off topic and might be a little offensive, but one of the reasons why like so many pedophile priests end up getting away with it and just get wrist slapped and moved to another moved to another location is because they're like pretty much protected under like the Vatican's legal immunity structure, and they have like similar levels of legal immunity as diplomatic agents. And that's why a lot of times like they'll be forced to step down, and sometimes they will face jail time, but a lot of time they'll be able to evade that and be able to like camp out into the country and like avoid charges and things like that. But that's who I'd say like if you want to look at who's really running things, it's who's above the law. And I'd say that's like the core of the city of London, which Rothschild also is active in, but also Vatican City over in Rome.
Yeah, I Cynthia and I and Dave visited Rome last year, and we went to in the Vatican City. It's great. It's very cheap. You see a lot of really high quality museums. I mean, it's a beautiful city in so many ways, but there's a creepy factor too. But within the Vatican City, there's like 10 museums you get to see. They're exceptional, except the last one, the very last display, right as you leave, and you can spend hours and hours there. You can spend days and days there. But as you leave, the very last display is an homage to Robert Flood, the Rosicrucian. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's an immersive thing where you have like people in this invisible cage. And as I walked into this thing, I'm like, this is not fitting what I just experienced. And it's the sort of the last statement of intention. And if these people who are like screaming, they're scared, they're in darkness, but they're all like, it's just video images of these people on all of the walls. And I'm like, this has a Rosicrucian feel to it. And then I looked at the little plaque describing it, and sure enough, yeah, it's an homage to Robert Flood, the Rosicrucian. And that's one of the things that I've noticed, that a lot of the those who have been promoting and amplifying these very simplistic narratives about who to hate, who to give your hate and fear to, who's the bad guy, often has a Jesuitical and Rosicrucian undertone behind it. Like even the protocols having come from the figures who are high up in the rites of Memphis and Misraim, and this Rosicrucian rite of strict observance within Freemasonry. Even going back to the French version of Maurice Joly, who was an initiate of the rite of Memphis Misraim in this Egyptian Cagliostro lodge system. So it's like they're all deflecting attention away from the actual Satanists. These are the direct conduits of the Templars that went underground and then reemerged in different incarnations. And two of the most powerful incarnations are these like left hand, right hand paths of the Jesuits and the Rosicrucians. And that's what they're always trying to make sure you don't look at that. Look at everything but that, So I really appreciate.
Well, it's less about.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I do think there are high level hidden families, but it's like every single, rather it's Rothschild or even Kelowna. It's like I was talking about how Kelowna has easy to prove high level official positions if like you look them up. Just like look up Kelowna deputy director of NATO, or deputy secretary general of NATO, director of like the European Commission, head of European. You'll find all kinds of stuff, but it's like there is no single individual, no matter what family they're from or what position, that's like irreplaceable. It's like if any of these people become incompetent for whatever reason, they can be replaced, and the whatever the network wants to do will be able to continue on, because like this, it's less about individuals, no matter how high a level that you go. It's more like this interlocking bureaucratic machinery, which I'd say kind of have its life on its own. I'd say, like, from a Christian perspective, it's because it's under the headship of Satan himself, essentially. And that's the real head of the serpent, and like all the human. So it's like it is a human hierarchy, and there are humans in top positions, and those can be either inherited or earned through merit. But ultimately, like, it's not even really humans directing it. So it's like the idea that, like, we need to just like expose these certain families, rather it's Rothschild or even people who I'd argue are higher ranking. It's like that's a little bit misdirected. It's like what you want to do is you want to expose the machinery, and the right hand, left hand path, I think, is more revealing than just like naming certain individuals or families. And once you're able to like look at it at an abstract level, then see how it works at a local level. And if you know how it works at a local level and you could see it interacting with your own local community, that's where you might actually be able to have some autonomy in a way that can push back in like your own personal life. That and you really, what you want to do is actionable, is find actionable solutions, because it's like you're going to find way more actionable solutions at a local level and within people within your own sphere of influence, and like, yeah, I'm going to go expose this and I'm going to go change the world. And like that's to me, that's just a messiah complex right there at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a culture spiritual battle principally, and I think to the degree that we can get people to properly appreciate how the game plan works and how people are conditioned to fall into these traps through controlled um, manipulations of the human condition, the right hand left hand path being sort of one way that these, the sensual side and the logical side are played with into institutions. And then you can sort of see that reflected in your own ability to say to yourself, okay, am I harmonizing my heart and my brain, like my logic and my conscience? Are they harmonizing, or are they getting worse? Are they getting broken up? And to the degree that you're working on harmonizing them, I think that we become more qualified for developing or taking on bigger responsibilities in the world outside of us to actually find solution concepts to counteract the type of rot that this thing is really specialized in spreading. It requires our sort of consent and our ignorance in being conduits of the rot that seeps and spreads multi-generationally and stuff too. But definitely learning about this and mapping it out is super duper important. And then just showcasing like where the scarecrows are, where the wind eggs are is super valuable too. But before we like, I noticed Dave has been waiting for a while to ask you a question. I'm curious to see what Dave Goslin has to say. Dave, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yo, well, I mean, the discussion is technically, yeah, I was going to just jump off what you guys were saying, which is kind of, but that was great, Mike. It's always refreshing to hear you. I was like, at first when I started listening, I was technically trying to multitask. Then I just like put everything, I was like, okay, I'll just have to do this later. I just started to, you had my 100% undivided attention. Well, several things. So I cheated. I said I have one question, but thoughts, questions. Because what you started to say at the beginning is also something about, the continuity and the interfacing between Christianity, early Christianity, and these sort of Roman power structures, and how that morphed, around the time of Constantine. And I would like to know a bit more about that. I feel like there's a lot of, it's very mysterious, right? Like in terms of Council of Nicaea, like how many compromises were made, good guys versus bad guys. Do we even want to like think about it in that kind of like dualistic way, maybe, or maybe?
I wouldn't. Let me just say that. Sorry, I just want to say really, I don't recommend a dualistic way of looking at it, because it's like It's like what changed around the time of Constantine is you'd see state power getting involved with the church, and you'd see, so this is when you start seeing entanglement with bureaucracy and Christianity on a much higher degree. But this was starting to go on before Nicaea or Constantine. So it's like, if you look over at the book of Revelation, where Jesus is talking to John and saying, "You you have you have partaken in the deeds of Nicolaitans," like he's going off after the Nicolaitans, and they have like these patterns of licentiousness and immorality. There's not really any extra biblical sources that tell you exactly what the Nicolaitans were. But once you start looking into these churches developing lewd practices, you see people coming in and kind of giving like these precursors to these aesthetic practices, and you start seeing like developments like celibate priesthood, and you didn't have selling of indulgences and like way or purgatory, or ways to like reduce time in purgatory, and things that would become like later clerical abuses in the context of simony, like selling church offices and things like that. But you would find precursors to that coming up early on, and it would be related to these people would have lewd lifestyles, and these kind of practices, which would have like added elements of ritual and dependence on like a more human based hierarchy, would be offered as the escape hatch out of it. So at first, churches were, it's like churches had a plurality of elder type model. It's like, you can see this from the first epistle of to Clement of Rome. It's like a lot of Catholics will circulate Clement of Rome as backing up the papacy, but they'll use letters that come after First Clement. It's like First Clement only refers to there being a plurality of elders in Rome. It doesn't match the single bishop monoepiscopate model whatsoever. So I'd say that the Nicolaitan mess gave rise to the monoepiscopate, and gave rise to more ceremonies as an escape hatch to sin, instead of going to the priesthood of Christ with him as the intermediary, and having like a more simple kind of localized church government structure. And then you had it came in degrees after this. So before you had like the Roman emperor intervening on councils, you had church bodies sort of start developing into regional centers that would resemble like this Greek republic, where certain bishops of certain cities would start having jurisdiction over bishops in like small cities and small towns. Because like once you look at the Apostle Paul and like how he's organizing donations in the book of Corinthians and things, it's like they will have interchurch cooperation, and people with apostolic authority would end up having precedent. But it would be this sort of system where, let's organize as the need arrives, but let's terminate this arrangement after this is over. It's like, we're going to be in communion, we're going to recognize each other as fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. But they didn't create like these permanent kind of like institutions that you start seeing coming up like a little bit before, but especially after Nicaea. And that's where it starts becoming what I'd argue is very prone to corruption and interference with like earthly magistrates and power structures. But another reason, I'm sorry, it's like you threw something out there that I had like a long answer to.
No, keep going. Yeah.
But yeah, well, I have to move outside though, because I had to borrow my mom's computer, but her husband just got back. Hey, one sec. Yeah, but if you go with the narrative, like, so the narrative that the reason why I was pushing back on Hislop earlier, and Hislop's a Protestant, so it's like he doesn't make all these mistakes, but people end up like reading Hislop's Babylonian Trinity and how like the Council of Nicaea repackaged all this. If you go with this idea that the Council of Nicaea is what corrupted everything, and that like Nicaea was a giant conspiracy that the Romans sided with, that doesn't really even line up with what happened in Roman history. Because it's like, yeah, Constantine ended up siding with the Nicaeans, who were in favor of the Trinity, against Arius. But shortly after the Council of Nicaea, like after Arius got excommunicated, Arius ended up cozying up with Constantine and his family, and he was promoted to the Roman court. And Constantine himself, towards the end of his life, was baptized by Arians, not Nicene Christians. Then Arians end up getting the backing of Roman state power, and Constantine's sons became converted to Arianism. So whenever you hear about, like, after Constantine, you had Christians getting the power of the sword and conquering, killing people. At first, so it's like you would have people who are on paper Trinitarians doing that. Don't get me wrong. It's like you would have Trinitarians yielding state power and killing heretics, and I completely disagree with that. Even though I'm a Christian, I do not think that that Christians are mandated to murder people for what they believe. But at first, it was Arians doing that. It was Arians who were actually persecuting, and even in cases actually persecuting like non-Arian Christians themselves too. So the first ever branch of Christianity to yield the sword and yield Roman power, it was Arians, and those were the guys who lost the Council of Nicaea. So that's one of the. It's like you can hear narratives like that sound compelling, like, oh, we have this Babylonian Trinity, here's your continuity. But it's like once you start getting into details, there's like things that don't line up with that kind of story.
Do you think it's because Arianism was more befitting for as a conduit for Stoicism, or for like what was it about Arianism that you think made it more useful for getting that kind of effect in battle and what have you?
You know, that's actually a really good question. That's actually a really good question. I think that Arianism, it's because you have the sun being created, where it's like the sun is created and the father is like the creator God, and like they will end up saying that, like, well, yeah, Christ was created, but everything was created through him. Once you start denying the Trinity, though, it's like I'd say that you have it does affect Christian cosmology a little bit, where the Trinitarian system, it is hierarchical, but it shoot I don't know where I'm going with that. I don't know. That's something I haven't put much thought in. That's something I haven't put much thought in, why they went with Arianism. It's like, I'm not sure why they sided with it at first,
Yeah.
but it's just something I noticed that I think conflicts with that narrative a little bit.
It was something that I've been thinking about too, and so that's why it sort of sparked in my head when you brought it up. And I was thinking maybe that the conduit of like the Mithraic, because the Mithraic religion was the key thing for the Praetorian Guard. That was what gave it its vitality. Was everybody had to be initiated into Mithra, and Mithra has this.
No, henotheism. Yeah, no, henotheism
Right.
is where I'm going with that. Yeah, because like
Yeah.
it's like Arianism is more like henotheistic, where it's like you have like a chief, where you have like a head chief god, and then you have like this other god that also has kind of divine status. But it's like, yeah, like that kind of Jesus does resemble these more sun god figures more, because it's like if you look at Egyptian mythology and stuff, like Mithra, like Ra himself is named in there. It's like, I do think there's like a connection with all these various sun gods, Mithraism. It's like Atum, it would be like, rather have Atum and Adam Ra, or Amun and Amun Ra. It's like you have this like chief spiritual creator god, and then you'd have like this lesser god who would make. So you'd have one god that would like make the heavens in the overall cosmology. Then you'd have another god that would create man. And Arianism does kind of like fit into that framework a little bit more, I think. Yeah, but where I was going with hierarchy, I don't entirely know. It's like, because there are differences in which Arianism and Trinitarianism do have like implications on a more metaphysical hierarchy, but I need to read more into that before giving a certain answer, because I was like, oh, I have an idea, and I was like, wait a second, I don't want to go make a bunch of errors live if I go with this and give an answer. So that's the kind of thing I need to put more thought in.
You're that's a sign of a true honest soul, man. That's good, and I appreciate still for you just sharing the components of the still developing hypothesis. That's good. And it's good practice for everybody else to sort of get vicarious into how the mind just develops a self-conscious awareness of like, what do we know? What do we don't know? How do we form a good hypothesis versus a bad one? Dave, did you want to do a follow-up before I go to Sue?
Yeah, just to follow up on it was also related to what you were just saying before you answered. And I appreciate the answer. And I have some thoughts, but I'll save for another time. Right. So, the other thing is that when we start to get into the whole, breaking down the power structures and whatnot, I appreciated what you said. I've thought this for a long time too. Like, people looking for like, who are the bad guys? Who are the bad guys? And people get like this kind of OCD obsession with like, mapping out who are like the central ultimate, evil, as if you would just, get these guys out and then like you could like change the world, but that's not really, there's a system in place, right? There's a slime mold, and it's very deeply entrenched into history and the world. But then so it's like, if people don't have you could say spiritual, epistemological foundations, constitution, it can be overwhelming, right? When you look at the darkness, or like, how the power structure is organized and how entrenched it is. And then you get this thing where then, people who do make a few discoveries, they kind of like, I guess you could say they skip some steps or they miss some steps, and they just go kind of more fundamentalist, kind of like hardcore. I don't know what we want to call it or what you would call it, but like when I'd say Christian fundamentalists, in the sense that like they just reject the whole world, which isn't, I mean, technically Christian either, right? Like just
you can call it escapist. You can call it more. Yeah. I just call it escapism or doomerism.
Yeah, it's like a trauma response. Technically, it's like a cope. And so like walking that line, because you were talking about actionable things that people can do and at the local level, and that's where I kind of observed that. I guess that's what was interesting. Or special about Christianity, is that there was a kind of bottom-up approach that was arguably new or different, right? In terms of like, it was targeting the most downtrodden, right? And there was an idea of, there was a change in the heart that could then lead to real world change and actions. And so the relationship of that to politics was a bit different, right? I guess, than how people are used to even today. Like, you had to have a change in people if you could have any kind of more meaningful, effective change in the world, which obviously has political implications, but it's not such a one-to-one relationship, right? Between like how you organize people, how you develop them, how we develop epistemologically, spiritually, and how that allows one to become an effective or sovereign actor, right, or organizer, such that you can have real world effect. So you touch on that a bit. So I just wanted to maybe hear you, talk about, hear a couple quips on how you think about that.
Well, yeah, it's like, if you want to go out and have an impact, it's like you need to have your own house in order. It's like that's the kind of thing that Jesus himself would say. And that's why if you want to, like, from a Christian perspective, and it's like, I'm not saying like if you're an atheist, you can't go out and have a difference, but just in terms of like how I've been able to find things, and there are some things I can't share because it's like I have things developing that I haven't completely executed on, but like it's the kind of thing where if I give details, it could like end up compromising people. I don't want to do that, but a lot of it would be from, because part of it, I'm connected to a local church, and it's like I do have people who are like connected to like periphery level of institutions. It's like there's one guy at my church. He actually got like an email. I forgot which like kind of Rockefeller network it was. Rather, it was like the Rockefeller Center or something, like the Trilateral Commission. But it's like there's like a guy at my church who was like adjacent to those institutions that would be like recruited to those kind of networks. But it's like part of it is it's like I have people who they are with low level banks. It's because it's like one of the people in my church, he's with South State Bank, which they're going out of their way to avoid ESG, but it's like this guy knows about ESG. He's connected to people who are like involved with resisting it. And it's like he can all if I want to like make claims or posts about banking and stuff, there's a lot of things I don't know because it's like you can read stuff online, but it's like they use a lot of jargon that you really can't understand. So when there's like this community of people and you have a common ground, which would be like, you know, a shared religion, a tradition like that. Um, there's like this shared connection. So then you can come up with it and be like, well, hey, I'm working on this. Can you clarify me? So it's like you can have people there who will like fill in the gaps and context and things that you're missing. And if for whatever reason like you're involved with things relevant to what they're working on, it's a way for you to untangle loose ends within your own understanding so you can actually find out things to execute on. But also it's like if you want to go make a difference in your local community or whatever, or depending on so the level of reach of your influence, it's going to be relative to where God puts you in life, where you are in life, who you have contacts with. But it's like it's the idea that like just going online and sharing ideas that you're gonna be able to go out there and make like such a big impact. It's like going online can get you there to a certain extent, but it's like I find my best leads from people contacting me online. It's like eventually I come into contact with like I've had people with like local or even federal level law enforcement working on trafficking cases, and this is why I'm trying to be careful with how I word things, because if I say too much, I could end up doxing people who sent me like information that like would lead to ICE raids, but the ICE raids would end up like covering up some of the trafficking operations, and like only a couple of like the slaves involved with this stuff would be deported, while like the actual traffickers are still like operating these facilities. But I've used like online connections to come into contact with those people, but I've only been able to get far with that and be able to like understand the kind of framework that they're giving me is because like I already have gotten guidance from my own local community of people who are involved with adjacent institutions. So it's like you wanna like have a sound conscience. It's like if you have levels of self-hatred or uncertainty, it's going to be a lot harder to go out in the world or make a difference in the way that you want. You don't want to have like internal confliction, and having a community involved can keep you in check, keep your because it's like if you have errors in judgment, that can really mess up a lot of things and stop you from really going anywhere useful. And pride is a major thing that can get in the way of that. So you want to be able to have humility and listen to people with opposing viewpoints who could like check your biases, because it's like self deception is really powerful in all this. It can be really hard to see through. So it's like it's a mix. It's a mix of, because if you're online and you have people with connections that could help you, you can take those opportunities, but like there's not as much a level of accountability when you have like online people or people online offer you connections. It's like you need, in my opinion, you need a little bit of a mix. And from my Christian perspective, a church community that's spiritually healthy would be ideal for finding that balance. That's where I'd go with that. I'm not sure if I answered exactly what you wanted me to say, but that's where I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I would just add one thing. No, and that makes sense. And like, there's the part about, as you said, you got to have your discernment has to be, on the spot, so that you don't make critical errors in judgment that, down the line, will determine whether something can fail or succeed regardless. But then the community aspect, I've talked about Matt about this. We've all talked about this, but like, yeah, part of the whole cybernetic cave system, right, is everybody is kind of atomized. And that, if anything, is one of my biggest criticisms of like the whole alt media. Everybody's got their own little silo and echo chamber, but they don't have any, sense of like fraternity, or like, isn't there one major force of evil that everybody should be banding together against? And instead you see that they're all totally splintered and tribal,
it's
right? So
balkanized. Yeah.
when you don't have community, that's like, sure, Tim Dillon was making a funny joke, like, you like being smart isn't even like, that doesn't even really help you in the world. He's like, when you meet somebody smart, usually you're surprised. You're like, wow, like, I'm surprised you're not more successful. Like, you're smart. It's like, that doesn't actually help you much. But part of it is like, well, there's no community, like there's no foundation. And so there's no trust. And so that's arguably one of the bigger obstacles to any kind of even political organizing, right? Or like having a community and a culture that then at least becomes some kind of like effective local even force in its community. And then the leap that community would have to organize itself with other communities that have their own cultures, right? And I think that's actually where the actual Christian spirit, like the power of it becomes important, because it's like, if you can't see yourself working with other communities, even if they're not exactly aligned, like technically the Christian churches were different, right? Like depending on where they were, like that was the part of the idea of like a Catholic, i.e. universal church, that like depending on where you are in the world, it does have a bit of its own character. The rites may vary a bit, but that's fine if like the universal, concepts and principles are ultimately the same. But it's like people have totally lost that ability, right? Of like the one and the many, like they're totally tribal. And you can't really use your discernment if you're truly tribal. You don't really have discernment. Like it kind of applies maybe in your own network, but as soon as you interface with others, it's like it's kind of, yeah, people revert to like, they become kind
No,
of
it's the
like,
hive. The hive instinct takes over your mind.
yeah, and the bad guys know that, right? So that's why like Jesus's message, and that like at the most universal level, it's like it's it's not, he was basically anti-tribal. Jesus was like not a tribalist. He was saying, this is a covenant for everyone, and it's not just based on like your blood or your this or your that, but it's really, I mean, it's where your heart is in a sense, right? And like what you actually adhere to in your principles and morals. So yeah, that's been lost.
Well, yeah, let's throw that at Mike, and then we'll go to Sue, because I know Sue's been also waiting for a while.
I just want to say, like with Christianity, it's pretty interesting because it's like hedonism and stoicism are opposed. It's like hedonism can be like reduced to fundamentally like the ultimate good would be aligned with your self-interest. It's not just like pursuit of pleasure for pleasure's self. It's kind of like this idea that the best thing for you would be what pleases you or whatever. And then stoicism is kind of like to find the best path, you need to be like emotionally detached and things like that. There's some overlap with Buddhism, but it's like with Christianity, it's like you could write John Piper has done this. He's written a book called Christian Hedonism, but you could also take Bible passages and write a book called Christian Stoicism, because it's like Christianity kind of has a good balance between both of them. Because it's like a lot of people say like, Jesus says like he appeals to heavenly treasure, and he appeals to like if you want to find like happiness and eternal peace, like you will find it in me, but you also need to die to yourself. And like the balance between something like stoicism and hedonism comes in, that like your sin nature needs to be killed and needs to be crucified, because those desires are destructive. But like, come to me and I'll give you like new taste buds and a new appetite that won't be destructive to you, and you can pursue your desires that you'll find in me in a way that benefits you. So it's like, and same thing with like community and individualism, because it's like there's this kind of like dichotomy between communitarianism and individualism, where it's like those two things will be put in opposition. But it's like with Christianity, you can find a balance, because it's like, yeah, it's like you can have a priesthood or eldership, like, rather you're like Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant. Like, I don't want to get too much into those debates, but like what we can all agree on is that there are clergy, and that your community will have, ideally, I advocate for a plurality of elders type model. But you're going to have the community is going to have leadership of people who like literally their career is to like read the word, pray, have communion with God, and then like give instruction on how to do that with people who aren't doing that full time. Like that's kind of like what being a spiritual guide is about. And there is like a community aspect in that, which will be like mediated by a mentor figure in some ways when you do those group gatherings. But it's like also it's like your relationship with God is between God and the individual, and like that shows up in Christian ethics. So that's just kind of build on what David was saying about like community being important, but also like not atomizing too much. But one of the reasons why I am a Christian is because like the whole like theological and philosophic framework of Christianity like has balance that it can account for things that multiple worldly philosophies that are in opposition to each other, and kind of like dialectic opposites both get right in a way that like can harmonize them and reconcile like what different people focus on for their ethical systems and frameworks. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
All right, Sue.
Okay, hi Matt. Thanks, Mike. I just taking it back. Yeah, I agree with it. I think everything that you were sharing about the Rothschilds being thrown out as a front men diversion. But I've recently been looking into the Phoenicians. Heritage History has done about 30 years of reading and research. And what she looks at is the Sephardic Jews, which some was infiltrated by the Phoenicians, or the Phoenicians went to Spain, 1000 BCE. And anyways, her premise is that they use the sorry, I'm nervous now. Stupid. Ashkenazi Jews and the German banker Jews as a cover. And so I've been recently reading Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's written by a Jewish fellow who wanted to show that the Sephardic Jews were right online doing the same pirating, the same colonialist takeover with the Portuguese, with the Spanish, with the British. And I haven't read it all yet, but in one place they talk about when she talks about the Sephardims, she's talking about the Phoenicians and their conversos. They change. But when they went to Netherlands, and even in some of their colonialist ports, the Ashkenazis were not allowed to marry the Sephardic. And I'll just mention a couple of more names. Juan Alfonso de Palenco was the scion of a powerful converso family from Spain. He was the secretary of Ignatius of Loyola. So he did all the correspondence. He was there when Ignatius died. He was the overseer of the Jesuits. And I totally agree with Matt that it's always, don't look at the Jesuits, don't look at the Rosicrucians. Another one is Francisco Lopez Suezo, who was a Sephardic banker, and he financed William III's invasion of England. So
Yep. Invasion of France or England.
England.
Okay, right.
Yeah. But so I think it's really important for me anyways to really separate this out. And then when you look at some of the DNA studies, what they're showing is it was the Sephardic Jews who came over to America first, even with John Winthrop. And that's my ancestral lineage, so I checked that out. According to Mrs. Heritage History, that came over on the Mayflower, there were a few. If they trace back to the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians are really good at going undercover, they have so many riches buried all over the world. There's another book called Did the Phoenicians Discover America? And we're talking, BCE, 1000 BCE or whenever. They had the greatest ships. They developed writing. You can't find any of their writing. So anyways, I'm just kind of planting that as a seed to further investigate.
Thank you.
Well, I know. So I
Mike,
will.
go for it.
I've been saying, so like Sephardic Jews, they'd actually consider like Ashkenazi Jews as like subhumans. There'd be a lot of like, no, seriously, like there's a lot of like, if you look at some of the literature there's a lot of like Jew on Jew kind of racism going on. And I've said that if you want to look at the top Jews or people who call themselves Jews, like if you want to get into this, like, oh, are they really Hebrews or are they Phoenicians? I'll just use Jew for simplicity, since like they just have that label or whatever. I've been long saying that Sephardics are like higher level. It's like you can find a good bit of like intermarriages with Sephardics going back to like Reconquista era aristocrats, and these would feed into lesser nobles who would marry into greater noble families, like along the time like Habsburg, like around the time Habsburg were lesser nobles, they would have some intermarriages with Sephardic Jews. And I couldn't find any after the 1200s or by the time they became Holy Roman Empires, but it's like you definitely do have some intermarriages with prominent families. And another Sephardic Jew, Diego, I forget his last name, like the second Black Pope after Loyola, between Francis Borgia, he was Sephardic. Also Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
He was half Sephardic. He was also from the Colonna family I was just talking about, though. So it's like he's an example of like a core papal Roman family intermarrying with a Sephardic merchant family from Valencia. So it'll be a Colonna from Genoa marrying a Sephardic merchant from Valencia, and that's not 100% proven. It's like there are some people who will contest the DNA analysis on Christopher Columbus, and it's like that can get a little convoluted for me. I'll just say that like if it seems to me like that's true, and that kind of analysis would make a good bit of sense. And also, it's pretty interesting how at the unification of Spain, 1492, you kick the Sephardic Jews out, but the Spanish still held Belgium and the Netherlands, and it would have just been like the Spanish Netherlands at the time, because then the Belgium didn't break off into its own country around then. But places like Antwerp and Amsterdam became like the Spanish Empire's new financial headquarters. And while they were kicked out of Iberia, the Sephardic Jews, they were allowed in those places. And because they've been like skilled merchants and bankers for a while, it kind of does make sense that like the money would follow them up there. So
right, and then they established the Dutch East India Company right at that time as well.
I mean there's definitely I've long held that the Sephardics are one of the, like, look at ethnicity ratio to power, that they're definitely one of the higher ranked ones.
Right. And it never makes it into the conspiracy theories, right? It's all undercover, and my understanding is most of the Jewish people that died during the Holocaust was Ashkenazi Jews. They're always set up. And then they use the anti-Semitic laws to hide behind. So again, this book, Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, so he's a Jewish fellow. Well, he's died. And I looked, and you can't get any information about how he died, but he actually wrote that he wanted people to know that they were amazing pirates of the Caribbean, So there's a lot of incredible information about the Sephardic Jews in this book. So yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
Yeah, in a few weeks, we're going to get a lecture from a former city banker actually who's reformed. He's a reformed city banker that we met in Thailand, and he's done a good deal of work on the Spanish Sephardic directors of the Bank of Amsterdam and then the Bank of England, or at least the roots of these groups, which I'm fascinated by. I'm concerned that he might be leaning a little bit in his mind a little bit too much towards an anti-Semitic way of thinking, but we'll see what he has to say. I'm curious.
Well, like those people can still get a lot of things right, actually. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like they might not look at some of the other things, but it's like there's so many things going on with like even Ashkenazi Jews, but especially Sephardic, that like if it's like it's like that's why I focus on it being an input output feedback system, because like you can have inputs which are like valid insights and stuff. It's just the issues I have with a lot of it comes down to like what kind of story you're telling, and that becomes a little bit like resistant to data. It's kind of like if you look at the Napoleonic Wars, you have so many biographies written on Napoleon on the pro and against side, and they'll come to radically different conclusions, but like they'll all get like the battle details right. Who was this general who was going to this meeting and stuff? It's kind of more like a matter of the kind of general framework that you use. So that's the way I see it, is like I'll look at literature that'll look at facts, and I'll try and read it through the lens of what kind of bias the writer has or where they're approaching it from. But I'm not going to try and like, just because they come to a conclusion or have a framework I disagree with, I'm not going to throw out everything that they say out there.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I think we've reached the top of the second hour, and you've given us a lot. I'm really happy that you've just established this great resource for researchers, for people who are just confused and want some clarification on very important, highly charged topics that need to be clarified right now if we're going to be able to actually make it through this minefield called life of misinformation and false narrative trips. So thank you so much, Mike, for sharing. And like I went through everybody got the invitation, but Mike's X account is fantastic. It's a really great resource along with his YouTube account. So I want everybody to go and subscribe to those things, share as well, get the word out. I mean, it's criminal. The some of the views, you deserve to get tens of thousands of views, and we got to like jack this up right now, because it's the appreciation for the type of research you're doing is not adequate in my view. Mike, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave people with before we round it out?
Well, I just want to say, piggybacking, I forgot that lady. I'm sorry, I'm not good at remembering names at first. Tries. So is it Susan? Yes. I mean, I'll just say, like, she brought up people doing research on Spain, and you brought that Citibank guy. I'll just say that in a lot of ways, the power structure and the way it operates, you could say it's Babylonian, you could say it's Egyptian, you could say it's Greek. There's some Persian elements, but like I actually think all those things became synthesized in Spain. It's like you had Punics in Spain, you had Greeks in Spain, you had a lot of these like various people from the Middle Eastern Muslim part coming up to Spain. So it's like Spain had a mix of like Christian, Jewish, Muslim. Then you even would have some like weird like African voodoo type stuff coming up there, and like all these esoteric traditions would mix. So I'd actually argue that like Rosicrucianism, Jesuitism, like the right hand, left hand path that you were talking about, and I'd say that the major bottleneck for the input output feedback system of esotericism and secret societies running the world right now comes from Spain. I'd argue like Spain's probably the major bottleneck.
And that's where the Templars, they were shut down in England and France and in various parts of Europe under the papacy's sort of directives. But in Spain, they didn't skip a beat. They just reemerged.
Order of Montesa, Valencia. Yeah. And then guess who? Yeah, so, and that's interesting because it's like, go to Darren X account, like Golem Nugs, I think is his handle or something like that. Darren, I mean, you'll see, look up 1588 on his timeline. He has like a bunch of these various like English and Spanish cardinals, people who are members of the Spanish Order, the Golden Fleece, Order of the Garter, around the time of England's sinking of the 1588 Spanish fleet. He proves that there was collusion going on between those two sides, and it makes sense because it's like this goes back to what I was saying about there being a little bit of a power structure, but the power struggles between church, local aristocracy, and monarch. And back at that time, the Spanish local aristocracy was kind of like outgrowing their britches a little bit. So like if the monarch wanted to end up centralizing power, and if the church was worried about some of these local aristocrats becoming loose ends, it would make sense that they want to tank their own economy and go like, well, wait a second, England actually has a more meritocratic culture, and we're already thinking about going in that direction. So let's move our imperial financial base of operations up there and get this British empire prepared. Because around then you already had John Dee and Francis Bacon talking about a new Atlantis and things like that. So what I think is you had like the inner levels of this international cabal kind of agreeing like, if we want long-term conquest, it's like when we have these Spanish colonies, they go and have these startups, but they're just kind of like digging up silver and gold, and like they're not really good at sustaining long-term wealth. But these Northern Europeans and their culture is much more fitted for that. So I think they kind of like made that kind of calculation and moved like their operations and esotericism up into England, and that's when you start having like the Rosicrucian movement popping up. That's when like you have the Dutch East India Company and British East India Company popping up. But yeah, I'm planning on doing a longer project on that. But right now, Darren is has the most on that of anyone right now. So I recommend looking into that.
Man, you're opening up the door to so many points of conversation. I want to keep this going, but I got to get you back on.
Yeah, I got you.
No, we have guests that just walked into the door, so I have to unfortunately round this thing out. But I do want to have you back on again, Mike. I mean, again, I just feel like
we can do Spanish. We can just do Spanish masonry next time or something.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because that's something.
Can we weave in some of the Conversio stuff material into that too? Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's something I won't need as many notes for. That's something I can just free ball, because like with this, like there's a lot of the Rothschild thing. There's like a lot of names and dates and things I can't pronounce, but trying to read it off the screen can make me botch and mispronounce things more. But with that, it's like Spanish masonry is something I've been at so long that I can just like do names and dates off the top of my head, no problem.
That's cool. All right. I'm going to be calling on you for this. All right. Thank you, Mike, so much. Like I said, go to the description box under this video for people watching to get access to Mike's X account and YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this Sunday. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights. And I'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.